Good morning. It's January 15th. We continue with Etger Keret's book, The 7 Good Years. I'm enjoying the lightness, especially as we get into as we approach more dark political days. And that's all I'm saying. That is all I'm saying. So we left off with idol war.
Idol worship.
Idol worship. That was close. Oh, here's somebody else. Tell me what did you think of it? Was this a good name for the story?
Oh, well, I loved it. It's funny because
Can you guys hear Ellen?
I laughed out loud, which I don't usually do. But when I went back after I'd read all the rest of the stories, I went back because I wanted to share it with my husband. And I couldn't find the places that made me laugh. But when I read it for the first time, just spontaneously, I thought it was really funny.
Yeah.
And it was I loved the repetition of when when he was a little bit older, but there was the same distance between the brother. I thought it was my favorite story yet.
Yeah. It makes you feel like, Etger Keret and his family dynamics. And we're going to get to what he has to say about his sister.
Right.
Which is kind of like the bookend of the brother. I also think, the past 5 years, his brother was in Thailand. Thailand is a big destination for Israelis. They like to go, and it's been a nice place for them to visit, but also, gay couples have adopted kids from there and surrogates, and so it's a really integral part. And I'm not sure. I feel like, we were in the groove last week. Again, it's very poignant about the Lebanon War. Even though this book was written 10 years ago, I feel like it could have been written today.
Yeah.
It's like
that's what I thought too.
right. What's old again comes around.
I couldn't believe it when I was reading it. I'm thinking it's yesterday's news.
Yeah.
It's just was incomprehensible. I mean,
And then in another story, they mention Mohammed Ahmadinejad from Iran.
Yeah.
I had to look up and see if he was alive.
Yeah, I did too. Yeah.
I was like, wait, did we kill them? But we didn't. So it's like the same problems over and over and over. Different names.
Always.
Same problem.
Same thing.
So, any other comments from this story?
I thought that, even though his brother, he idolized him, he ended up taking a totally different path than his brother. And they could still, understand one another and he was so young, the space between them is 7 years. And I understand that because I have one that was 6 and 7 years older than the next two. So, they may not have had a lot in common, but I can see where he would look up to him and try to follow his path and be like him.
Yeah.
But, he found his own path.
Yeah. And we are learning a lot about the family dynamics in this bunch of stories. Alice.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it was a very clever way of kind of bringing up all these issues that Israel is dealing with. And also what you just said, that, even though he idolized his brother, he went a different path. He had to be his own person, even though his brother, even though he idolized his brother, he realized that he wasn't going to be able to talk to elephants.
Yeah.
Like his brother.
Yeah. Yeah. And listen, elephants, again, another big thing in Thailand. Ellen.
Well, there's a sentence on 67, I think, that kind of It's not really, it sums it up. It's almost at the end. Throughout that long journey, I never got to be more than just a little of what my brother was. And at some point, I guess I even stopped trying. Partly because my brother's strange route was a very difficult one to follow. I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
And partly because I've had my own personal crises and confusions to deal with. It doesn't go on to see, they kind of left me, you know, what
Right.
everybody was talking about. But at any rate, I thought it was cleverly put together and it was a great story. As Barb said, it's a very believable thing for, especially when they're siblings that are so separated. The little one, of course, starts out wanting to be,
Right.
well, you hope that they start.
Exactly. Right. And his sibling, I mean, they've all taken such divergent paths.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Is this based on his story? I'm sorry.
Yes. Yeah.
It's true.
Yes.
It's all true.
It's like a more.
It's a memoir.
It's a memoir. Okay.
It's a memoir.
Because you had said they were very rich and there's one part.
No, I never said
She
that.
said the wife was very rich.
I didn't say that because I don't know that.
I thought you said
No, no.
Oh, did this guy, the author's wife?
Yeah, but she came from a very, I thought you had said
No,
that.
I didn't say that.
Okay.
I don't know a lot about her actually, but, if we go to Bombs Away,
Talks about how poor, he
Yeah.
talks about how poor they are. That's
Right.
why I just thought,
Yeah, no.
saying that she came from.
I think that, he lets everything, in Bombs Away, he lets everything go in the house except for roaches.
Yeah.
That was the line he had to draw.
Then he drew a line there. And I think it also highlights sometimes the mental, the situation in Israel. They call it the matzav, what's happening, that people are, go through this daily. And again, today, right now, I'm hoping that we hear about the hostages soon. I don't know if that's going to happen, before Trump gets in, after he gets in. I'm not sure what the trajectory is on that, but I think it's I don't think we have that type of mental pressure on us.
God, like.
No, the bombings and the whatever. Although when you speak to Israelis and they say, "Where are you from?" I usually say Chicago because I'm gonna say Deerfield, and they're like, "Oh, Chicago."
Al Capone.
Yeah, because they.
Well, they do say Al Capone.
I think it's it.
Then they started saying Michael Jordan, but they said, "Are you afraid? Are you afraid to go to Chicago? Are you afraid?" And then I tell them what I tell people here. Look, in Israel, you have to listen to the security people. You can't, and I tell the young kids this. I said, don't be thinking you're going to, sneak out and go to the wall or whatever. You have to be on a very short leash there. And I said, and it's the same with Chicago. There's certain places that I'm not going to go at midnight. And it's some of that is common sense and some of that is knowing the area, knowing where you are. But I think it's rich when they're worried about me and worried about what's happening here. Evie.
When we were in Israel, probably about 10 or 11 years ago, when it was really our first and only trip, and we were in a gift shop and I was buying some Bugga Dubbins for our granddaughters, and one of the Israelis said to me, "Aren't you afraid to buy that for them?" And I was so startled to hear that. Whereas, last week, when our grandchildren were over for, well, it was the night after Hanukkah, what can I say? That's how it is. And one of our grandsons, Ethan, had a chain around his neck, and I said, "What's on your chain?" He said, "Oh, it's my chai, and I wear it all the time." And it was just a totally different kind of a take on it.
Yeah.
The fear there, thinking that we should be fearful as Americans wearing an Israeli thinking that we should be fearful wearing a Star of David.
I have gone through different stages with that, wearing a big Jewish star. I still wear my hostage thing and there's some Hebrew on it, but you'd have to get really close to me. And we're going to be traveling, and I don't know that I would easily identify myself on a international flight somewhere. And, it's sad. Would I in the States? Probably. Alice.
I was just gonna say, Ellen, I have to disagree with you a little bit. I read a lot, I read ahead a lot, and I really laughed so much at the stories, but I was rereading them last night. And I was in the same, my husband was reading and I was reading, and I started laughing hysterically. He said, haven't you read those stories before? I said, yes, but there's
So you're still laughing. That's good.
I couldn't stop laughing. I got into like this laughing jag. But that's why I like this book so much. It makes you laugh, but it brings up just what you were saying, Vanessa, the stress that they were going through, you know. But they're talking about a dripping ceiling and the roaches, which is hysterical. But then you realize, oh my God, they're wondering if they're going to be wiped off the face of the earth.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, obviously humor, you know, a lot of people, that's how you get through things, is through humor.
Right. And of course, it's all on the predilections of this crazy friend of his.
Crazy.
You know, and why are we listening to, and we all have those crazy friends. I just saw something, I don't know if it was in the Senate hearings, but you know, they were talking about conspiracy theories. I'm like, oh my God, we can't start there. Terry and then Barb. Oh, wait, I'll unmute you. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, when you mentioned saying you were from Chicago, and they said Al Capone years ago, when we would go to Israel and we'd say Chicago, they'd say, "Oh, Al Capone," and then a certain amount of time passed, and they would say, "Oh, Michael Jordan,"
Yes,
which was a
but because
completely,
time- right.
you know, different connection they had. But in terms of this story, I really loved the fact that he took the whole idea of feeling like, you know, the fatalistic view, everything's going to be blown up anyway.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do this in the house. And then she wasn't going to do that, or she wasn't going to do the dishes. Each thing that they decided wasn't worth doing. But then ultimately, on the very last line, he says, "I'm calling the plumber tomorrow." So I really loved it. I loved it. I thought that you could all relate to just
Right.
feeling like, okay, if the world's going to end, we don't have to do anything about anything.
Right.
And
We don't have that excuse, and we still don't do X, Y, and Z and excuses. Yeah. Sandy, did you have your hand up? Oh, and then Susan. No?
One thing, I don't know if he ever mentions it in a story, but the most frightening thing, and I lived in Israel 12 years, as you know, the most frightening thing that happened to me in 12 years was the juking. Now, you know what juking are, Vanessa.
I do.
They're-
Cockroaches. And let me
Cockroaches.
just say, the cockroaches in Israel make our cockroaches look like ants. And I am not kidding. They are giant in Israel.
Giant. And where do you find them most? Where I saw them was in the most luxurious buildings. So, because those buildings are along the Mediterranean, and
Yeah.
those people that have beautiful apartments in Tel Aviv, in Netanya, and in Ashkelon, I'd be in a really gorgeous apartment, and suddenly this thing would come flying through the window and land, and people who live there are used to it. But when
Yes.
you're a guest and you aren't used to that, it's like a small bird just flew in, and they're black.
I agree with you,
With
Sandy.
a
It's
hard shell. They are not
super hard shell.
right. And that was the
Okay.
thing that scared me the
Yeah.
most.
Yeah. Susan, go ahead.
Well, I came
Susan
in
Weller.
2 minutes late, so I don't want to repeat.
It's okay.
But this story, and I guess I think it was Terry I can't remember who said about the first thing tomorrow morning, I'm calling a plumber.
Yeah.
It reminded me so much of, I think, the way we're feeling today here. is that there's so much going on that we have no control over. And so we just may as well live our lives the best we can and do what we need to do. I found this story really very touching in many ways. And it reminded me so much of the way we're living in this country today. And I have to
So
say,
I never thought about that. We're all nodding yes, so true.
So true. Oh my
and I
gosh.
have to say also, I've been to Israel 5 times. I've never seen a cockroach.
I've been
I
staying in
can't-
nice enough places.
I mean, if I saw one, it was in this country, not there.
Yeah.
And
I lived in the dorms. I saw it. Yeah.
well, I guess I always stayed in luxury hotels or something.
Or
But
something.
I never
J-
saw a cockroach or a bed bug or
Yeah,
All
but
right.
like
the
that.
luxury hotels that you stayed in had screens, and
Yeah.
most apartments don't have screens.
Yes,
Why you never saw them.
I think she's right. Yeah. Joyce, did you have your hand up?
Yeah,
Okay, go ahead.
my daughter's son-in-law and 2 younger grandsons just came back from 10 days in Israel to visit the oldest grandson who's doing his gap year there.
Very nice.
They spent 2 nights in air raid shelters at the beginning of the trip
Mhm.
and the end of the trip. In between, they had the most marvelous time. They were with family. We have a ton of family in Israel. And I just want to say that the family there said that the eldest, Gabi, would be safer in Israel than he probably would have been on a college campus here.
Oh my.
From all that they heard, what was going on in the world, in the United States
Yeah.
last year when he was debating about whether to go or not. And all I can say is he is having the experience of a lifetime.
That's fantastic. Unfortunately, the war is still going on. Again, I'm
Right.
praying that we're going to have a change. And some universities and other programs to Israel have altered or not gone. And, for me, that's the lifeblood. And I'm just so behind it. Did somebody else have oh, sorry, Barbara.
That's okay. I really love the story. And I think the juxtaposition of fatalism and optimism, and how can Israel survive having both sides of the story? And also, he, in the beginning of the story, he talks about what his son is going to be, the taxi driver, which is in the next story.
Right. That's hilarious.
And all of these, they were just really worried about what his son was going to be. And then you don't hear about it after his friend comes and tells him this story, and they start letting their whole life just stop and, go to hell.
Yeah.
And then I thought it was so interesting, this one sentence at the end here. And he says, we'll survive. If peace is what fate has in store, we'll survive it too. So there's a sense of fatalism, even with the peace, even
Yeah.
with the optimism that you have to have going forward.
Right. Agreed. Roberta.
I have 2 comments. One is I'm in Palm Desert and there is a skate park that has cement structures, and they're allowed every year to draw as much graffiti or everything they want on there. And so I go every year to take pictures, and this year it made my heart so sad.
That free Palestine.
Everything is free Palestine, and it's so blatant and allowed and accepted, and it made my heart sad. Even you can't escape it wherever you go. That's really sad, and a sad statement.
It's sad, and it is a sad statement, and it's written by people who I think, of course, don't have the full picture. And, when you see these, queers for Palestine. What are you're crazy. They would,
Chop your head off.
chop your head up. Agreed.
Vanessa,
Yes.
maybe
I just
what we should all
Wait,
be
wait, wait,
doing-
Sandy, wait. Let Roberta finish. Go ahead, Roberta.
want to know if we could talk a few minutes about the title.
Which title?
The title of the book.
Oh, The 7 Good Years. It's a memoir.
So it's the 7 good years in his life, if he thinks so.
Yeah, I mean, I think.
Of his
Of the
son.
son's life.
Right, of the son's life. Also, you have to remember, I'm sure it was written in Hebrew. When you say the 7 good years in Hebrew, that will immediately, to all Israelis, that's what, Joseph's dream was. 7 good years, 7 bad years. And they would immediately make the connection. I don't know that we always do.
Exactly.
Yeah, the 7 good years. That's what Joseph, told the Pharaoh. And the 7 when the 7 skinny cows ate the 7 fat cows, and so I'm sure it's also referencing that. I also am sure if we stay together long enough, I'm sure he's going to write another book.
Yeah.
And go on with his what's
14
happening.
years.
Yeah. Sandy, go ahead.
Thank you.
Listening to Roberta, it gave me an idea that I hadn't thought about before. Maybe all Jews that care about Israel should be going around with some kind of either spray paint or whatever these other people are doing. And where it says free Palestine, we should cross out just Palestine and put free the hostages, put the hostages there above. You don't have to erase Palestine, just put a line through it and then put the hostages.
Yeah.
And remind
yeah.
people all over the United States what's important to us.
Yeah, I don't know that I can advocate, this would be 2 wrongs make a right. And my book group is going out in spring graffiti, but
I would do it in a minute.
I know, Sandy, I know you would. I'm sure you're right there. And I'm really hoping that the hostages are freed this week. And I'm waiting with bated breath.
33 for how many hundreds?
Doesn't matter.
No, I understand.
Let's go on to what does the man say? And it's a very short story, but at first I had to read this twice again because at first I thought, was he not speaking in Hebrew? The cab driver, but the son is so young and he doesn't understand. And you never know when kids pick up. And we spent a week with the grandkids, and my daughter was with Esme, and all of a sudden they were talking about something, and she goes, "Hell yes," which is what I say, and I'm like, "Oh no." They're like sponges. They may not, what color is this? Green. No, it's blue. But oh hell yes, she remembered. Alice, and then Elaine.
I thought this was hysterical, but I think he's so good at describing his son, what he would be like at all these different ages. And kids, I'm not going to go through the whole story, but I remember as a young child having an experience like this. Kids are very literal, and also he was told probably by his mom and dad, you shouldn't speak like that to people, and if something comes up, you should say I'm sorry. So it's just like I just thought it was such a good description of what how a 4-year-old would act in this situation. And that last line, believe me, kid, I'm sorry. Yeah, the taxi driver must have been sorry. The whole thing.
Let us laugh out loud. And kids don't get sarcasm. What do you mean he didn't mean it? So, Elaine.
Okay, I think that this is a metaphor for our life, this story. It's not necessarily about a child. It's about how we treat people. I think you have to go a little deeper in this book and see what his thoughts are. I don't think that all the stories can be taken literally. I think he is using the child as an example. Okay, and I think all of the stories are examples of how we as adults should treat people. And I mean, think about it.
You don't think it really happened? You don't think?
I think it happened,
Yeah.
but I still think that we need to think about how we address people. I myself, my tone of voice might be a little bit sharp to someone, and I don't mean it. So I think that is a lot of what he's talking about. And I think when you live in Israel, you have to be optimistic and pessimistic. I think otherwise you just crumble under the pressure. And I think that's what he's also saying. Okay, that's my whole thing.
Yeah. A lot of, obviously, his writing we can look at it very deep.
Yes.
And we can relate it to ourselves, as Susan did beautifully, and, how we're feeling in this time period. The next story, my lamented sister. 19 years ago, in a small wedding hall in B'nai Brak, my older sister died.
I read that and I was such, I didn't understand the sentence. I had to read it 5
Well,
times.
because the next three, four words, she now lives.
Right, exactly.
I was very taken by it. And I'm playing with the camera here. Merle, go ahead. Oh, wait. You're muted. There you go.
Oh, this story hit me so hard. I was talking to my daughter on the phone in Minnesota, and she said, I'm going to a dinner party Saturday night, and they asked me to bring a non-dairy dessert. And she said, not something that I bake, but something that I buy because someone is Orthodox Jewish at this particular dinner party. And we started looking, and Jewel had these cupcakes that were non-dairy, but then it said on the package, prepared in a facility that is, exposed to nuts, milk, this and that. And she was like, oh my God, I don't think I can bring that either. And so we went on and how hard it was just to try to please the people who have all these rules and restrictions, and how religion can really tear people apart like this. So
Would you say that if they were vegan?
no,
Yes.
no, I wouldn't say it if they were Orthodox. It's just that,
Okay.
I mean, but the idea that if people have these very strict rules that they must live by, it can really tear relationships apart. Now, I know she's going to come up with a solution. And
Where does she live?
She lives in Minnesota, Minneapolis. And
I mean, she should go to a kosher bakery, because kosher bakeries I assume there's one, they're all just, it has to say par or OU par.
She can bring a fruit platter.
I'm going to tell her that. Forget the Jewel, forget the regular store. Just go to a kosher bakery. Thank you.
Right. Our Jewel has a kosher section.
Yeah.
But because of vegans, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't have milk, butter, because not only it can't have I guess butter's dairy, but and many baked goods have that.
Okay, so I'm lactose intolerant, so I can't eat anything. But if it's a cookie made with a teeny bit of butter, nothing will happen. But she's got to find something for people who are kosher. I will tell her your suggestion, but this story hit me so hard because it really complicates things. And
it does. I thought it was very funny, and it is true that he saw his nephews and niece, and they all have these double names, Shlomo Nachum and Bracha Tzipora, and they were testing him, and he brought them things. And listen, I give him kol hakavod that he still has a relationship with her.
Absolutely.
Because and what about with the book? And he had the editor draw in with the long sleeves and kippot, and you see how these kids are being brought up. And Netanyahu recently pushed through, because they are Netanyahu's base, that they don't have to go into the army.
They pushed it through.
Then they pushed it through, which I think is a shame.
It's terrible.
It's terrible.
I didn't know that. Oh my gosh, they pushed that through. Terrible.
There was a great article in the New Yorker that my Machatanim sent me that Bibi and Schmotrich and Ben Gvir, those are his top, crazy right wings. They're invested in keeping the war going.
Yeah.
Because it gives them power.
Also keeps them out of jail
Keeps
too.
Bibi out of jail. Absolutely.
And they promised not to sign the peace deal.
Yeah.
Which is horrific.
Really horrific. Hamas hasn't signed it yet, and I think it was signed off in Israel, but I'm hoping this is going to be a big week. A big, big week. Yes, Barbara.
This story, it was really interesting to me that he mentions 3 times in this story, 19 years ago, my older sister died and she now lives the most Orthodox neighborhood in Jerusalem. He repeats that sentence 3 times in the story. And, we know what happened to his brother, and his brother is, was so different, living in Thailand. And he, is this writer that's traveling the world and very secular. And I was a little confused though, and I still don't understand, and I read it several times. Have him and his wife been actually married?
No.
Well,
They were married in their own minds.
No, in Israel, the only person who can marry you is somebody from the Rabbanut, an Orthodox rabbi. And when you choose not to go that route, a Reform rabbi could have married them. It just, the state does not recognize. I couldn't think of the word. And it's, I can't remember who told us this. It was in on maybe Adult Enrichment or some Israeli was telling us that when the hostages were killed, their families had a funeral. And when the bodies were returned, the Rabbanut said, you have to have another funeral. And I was talking to my girlfriend about this. I said, what is that? She goes, it's more money for them. It's very lucrative to have this picture, you're in the Rabbanut. And I know a lot of people who don't want to go there. A lot of Israelis go to Cyprus because they do reckon if you get married outside of Israel, they recognize it.
Really?
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
Crazy.
So he recognizes his sister's family. He visits them. His wife cannot visit them because they will not recognize her as his wife.
Right.
He's pretty much a hero in my eyes.
He's a hero in my book too.
That's for sure.
Yeah, sure.
Good brother.
Yeah.
But so I was just very confused by that. And
if you don't know about the whole Rabbanut thing,
Yeah.
they could have, there's no secular marriage. It's the same for Muslims. An imam has to marry them. Christians, they're whoever father, pastor. You can't get a civil wedding license in Israel. You can't be civilly married in Israel.
so would his sister not recognize his child as legitimate?
I don't know. Good question.
Probably not.
Probably not.
Wow, he's really
So would never meet her.
Maybe not. Yeah.
That's what brings up.
And then these kids who only speak Yiddish, which he, in the end, he said it was very cute. It's like they walked out of the shtetl.
You look at these guys.
It's like they're in a whole different world. And I was dying to know what neighborhood they lived in Jerusalem. They probably Mea Shearim.
It reminds me of the Mormons that they.
Yeah, the Mormons.
Totally different way of life, and then they get 1 year off to see if they want to come back. They don't do that They don't do that in Israel.
I think in my evening book group, so we're reading Wayward Moon now and then on Eastern Parkway. And these books are called Off the Derech. And the derech means the way. There's tons of books of these, Orthodox people who are off the derech and they become secular. And a very famous one is Abby Stein. She is a trans woman and she grew up in this, in New York, and she barely spoke English because they only spoke Yiddish. and, you know, her family won't see her and maybe one or two will. It's a fascinating book. Okay, Sue and then Evie.
Well, I have a personal experience in that my brother got married in Israel many years ago, and he had trouble proving that he was Jewish because my parents and my family always belonged to a Reform synagogue. And oh my gosh, what my brother had to go through to prove that he was born of a Jewish mother and
Yeah.
and that he had, I mean, it was a problem.
Yes, absolutely.
Actually, they
Rabbi
ended up
gets a
getting
lot.
divorced, so he probably should have never married her anyway.
Did he get a get? Did he get a get? A
Uh,
Jewish divorce?
Which allows you
no,
to
no,
marry.
no, he doesn't live in Israel.
Oh,
He-
yeah,
he
but what
was-
about her?
He was living in Israel then.
I know, but what about if,
Well,
you know?
she was a daughter of Holocaust survivors.
Oh, she's.
And they met on a kibbutz in Israel.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Okay.
that doesn't
Yeah.
matter to anybody here.
Yeah.
It's just that how hard it was for them to prove they were Jewish.
Yeah, very hard. And Rabbi gets letters even now saying, can you write and tell them I'm Jewish and had a bar mitzvah and blah, 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 blah. So it continues. That struggle continues. Evie. Wait, I'll unmute you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I don't know that we need to go that far. We have friends who are Canadian, and her children from her first marriage are Baal Teshuvah, and they live in the West Rogers Park area here. And when they got married, when our friends got married, and there's a second marriage for both of them, and he's modern Orthodox, and she is sort of modern Orthodox too in her own way, but certainly not, you know, like her children. They would not come to their wedding because somebody did not get a get, so they wouldn't attend the wedding.
There's all sorts of rules. People have all
Yeah,
sorts of.
I mean, when these, you know, we know again a lot of stories about Baal Tshuva, BT, and they also have these categories of from birth. That sometimes the children of Baal Tshuva people, you know, if they've been from birth, and they can, you know, they can marry somebody from birth, and the Baal Tshuva usually marry each other. Now, one of the things that in the Haredi communities, especially, there's all this misinformation about vaccines causing autism. And if you're autistic, you have a harder time getting a shidduch, a match. And that's why there's measles now. I mean, they have all these crazy polio. It's really more than I can bear. And we can't get into vaccines now because that's another what's going on today. But that's, you know, they're always thinking, who am I going to marry? Who's my kid going to marry? And it's, I mean, that's what it is. Elaine.
On the other side, it's all these rules. Some people like rules.
Yes.
They like the structure of it.
Yes.
You know, I mean, I would find it absolutely stifling, you know, with my personality.
Yes.
But some people, what time you get up, what time you go to bed, who you marry, what you do.
Yeah.
You don't have to think.
Yeah.
And that is a big appeal.
Yes. They have an answer for everything.
It's like the Catholic Church.
Right. And when she went to her Rebbe and said, can they look at the books? He said, no. Okay, they can't.
Yeah. And I mean, you don't question it.
Yeah.
You just follow.
Yeah. Abby, then Alice.
I have a sort of funny anecdote about that. First of all, the acronym that I've heard, Vanessa, was FFBs, from birth.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Right.
FFB.
But you know, these people that I'm talking about, they were not. But we were there at the daughter's house one night. We had gone to the Chinese restaurant, the kosher Chinese restaurant that used to be on Devon years ago. We went to their house.
Mitsuyan. It was called Mitsuyan, which means excellent, but sounds Chinese.
Across the street. There were two across the street. So we were there and went back for tea, and they, you know, they don't allow any TV in their house. Oh, they have one where they could show pictures of the not the the Rebbe. And
Yeah, of
anyway,
course.
we're sitting and we're having coffee or having tea, and her son-in-law, who was about to shuva, was in the corner of the kitchen davening. And our friend Sarah went to find a teapot to make tea, and he's davening in the middle of whatever he's saying. He says, instant hot. So what he was saying was that there was an instant hot thing on the sink, the instant hot water, but it was in the middle of his prayers that he just blurted that out. I mean, I couldn't keep a
He was
straight face.
listening,
It was
not
so
really.
funny.
Yeah.
The main thing
Well,
was
they
that we
can.
were saying instant hot.
Alice, then Sandy.
Yeah, on page 81, I feel the story was very sad, not sad, I shouldn't say sad, but it showed the divisiveness in Israel.
Poignant.
Yeah, thank you for that word. Thank you. But it also showed the divisiveness in Israel in terms of the secular population and the really religious population. That first paragraph on page 81, where they said after the Lebanon War, they came up with a new genre, dirge for friends who've gone religious. He said the Lebanon War had taken so many of their buddies that the last thing anyone wanted was to see the others just disappear forever into some yeshiva in the armpit of Jerusalem. So, I mean, that's pretty strong language.
Yeah.
I feel, I'm not as, what do I want to say, educated about Israel, Vanessa, as you are or some other people, but to me, it just shows, wow, there has to be a huge division between the secular and the ultra-Orthodox. Yeah.
Orthodox, period.
Yeah.
It's like the Trump and the Democrats.
Sandy, and then Merle, go ahead.
Yeah, I just remember one family that we had a lot to do with. Their name was Marovich. They were Americans who had made Aliyah. They were living in one of these coastal apartments. In fact, 2 apartments they put together because they had so many children. And they lived in Netanya. And when my daughter was about to get married, and she was in the Air Force and marrying someone, an officer in the Air Force, they told us that it wasn't good enough that we were having Rabbi Marovich marry them, even though he was an Orthodox rabbi, but he was an American.
He wasn't part of the Rabbanut.
Right. So,
I'm sure they have to pay dues.
So in order to get the marriage done, they insisted, since they were in the Air Force and they could have a say about these 2 young people, they said an Air Force rabbi would also officiate. So we had 2 rabbis at the wedding, and everything went well. And the 2 rabbis, they each took a part in the wedding ceremony, and the kids were married. Okay, about a year or 2 after that, we were visiting Israel. We had already left the country after the 12 years. We were visiting there. We went to stop and see Rabbi Marovich and his family. And I had another daughter and son-in-law with me. So they were very cordial to us. They invited us into their apartment and insisted on putting cake out and tea. And this was when Obama was president. And do you know what Mrs. Marovich, who was the head of nursing at some Orthodox college, she said, if she had the chance, she would put a bullet in Rahm Emanuel and in, what is the name of the wonderful journalist from Chicago,
David Axelrod.
David Axelrod. She would put a bullet, this Orthodox woman says, she would put a bullet in Rahm Emanuel and David Axelrod for helping Obama. That's so much.
It's like the right wing. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, it's.
My daughter just stood up and she said, we're leaving. It was wonderful seeing you. And we just all scooted out of that apartment. And
Good for you.
And we've been back to Israel many times and we have never stopped.
No. How could you?
I mean,
Bezmir.
Bezmir is right.
Bezmir. Merle.
Okay, well,
Sandy was so lucky that she could scoot out of the apartment. What happened to me, I couldn't do that. It was 1999 and we were flying to Israel for this wonderful family event. My husband's cousins in Canada, 32 of them. We were all traveling together to go to a bat mitzvah in Israel. And when leaving from Chicago, our plane was stuck on the tarmac for 4 hours. So when we got to New York, we had to get a completely different plane, and I could not sit with my family on the plane. So I was sitting next to a stranger, a man who was Israeli, and there were many Israeli people around me, and they were getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to put on their tefillin the next morning and all that. So he said to me, oh, you're going to an event. He said, so what kind of Jew are you? And I said, well, I belong to a Reform synagogue. He didn't speak to me, not one word after that. He made a very angry face and turned away and did not speak to me after that. So
Okay, I think you dodged a bullet.
yeah. Yeah, because if he had spoken to me, I don't know what he was going to say, but you could
Can
see
only
he-
imagine.
He did not approve.
The last thing from the story, when he asked his sister to pray so he could marry this woman, and she said, I can't, what if it doesn't work out? And then they did break up and he meets his wife. I thought that was, again, a poignant, anecdote in their relationship. And it, shows where he's coming from, pray for me. And she's like, no. And it's really, I thought, again, he really summed it up. Repeating that line, my sister died 19, I think that that's very intentional. Again, not unlike the Bible. When it repeats something, that means it's super important. And yeah, Barbara.
I think it's very telling, the very last line. Who said the prayers aren't answered? Whose prayers?
Well, he means that he married, is with his
Whether it's his
woman that he
wife's
wants.
prayers.
Yeah.
It is his sister's
His prayers, probably,
And his
yeah.
sister's prayers too.
Yeah.
That it all
Or
worked
first-
out.
Yeah. Evie.
Yeah, first of all, there's something about the number 3 as being a symbol of intentionality. You do think twice is a coincidence. 3, there's a more of a pattern, more intention. But I also felt that her saying that, I found a bit of humility on her part as well. That she didn't see herself as being this all powerful, being the emissary of Hasha of God. I just kind of liked that about her. And I just felt that I found it comforting that the way she phrased that.
Yeah, I felt that their relationship was in, I guess, as good a place as it could be. And look, they had a relationship. And when he keeps repeating, my sister died, it makes you think, do they have a relationship or don't they? So we have 10 more minutes. Let's get to this last story, Bird's Eye. I don't know if you all remember that game, Angry Birds. And when he wrote this, it was huge.
The first one.
Yeah, it was really huge. And I totally and completely agree with his mother that it was very vicious.
Exactly.
And a lot of those video games are, and I think we're going to see with more studies as kids are playing video games more and more. And 10 years on from this, which is where we are, we have these mass serial killers who, no, that's not right. Mass shooters. Terrorists, whatever they are. And it comes out that a lot of them are gamers.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that everyone who plays video games is going to become this, but there is something just so real and visual, and it's terrible. And then these Angry Birds that little kids were playing.
Yeah.
It's fallen out. You never hear of it now. I guess there's so many.
There's other ones that are more vicious.
Yes. But, kids earlier and earlier, they were relying on, Lev was what, 7 So, because there was something that he could do and something his wife could do. And then finally, they decided, at the end that to get monopoly. And then at the very, very end, he says, here, my kid has got all the railroads. It's like this magnet and is trying to, get all the money from us. Is
I
he?
just have to say, when you just said about Monopoly, I have two twin grandsons who are 14 and they're really into, the games, and I tried to learn how to do it. We play Monopoly. It's the only game that I can play with them. The only game. So there must be something about Monopoly.
Right. Well, it's competitive. Monopoly is competitive.
They like that.
Yeah.
So I still play with them.
Yeah.
They'll play with me.
a board game.
Barbara, board games. Board games are back. Settlers of Catan.
Yeah.
And we played one with my kids when it's called, it's like Trivial Pursuit, but you bet on it. And they're like really odd questions.
Yes, yes.
And, one question I happen to know, and I bet hard on it, was when was the 50th state added? I knew it was Hawaii in 1959. I don't know why. It's like these things, I can't remember the name of the book, but I have that. You have all these things in your head. Sue Weller.
So at one point in the story, when you talk about the gaming and how it leads to, in certain cases, it leads to violent behavior. And there's a sentence here, I'm reading on my iPad, so I don't, but it says page 88. So I'm not sure.
Yes, that we have it. Yeah, go ahead.
It says Angry Birds is actually a game. Oh gosh darn, why did something come up and block me out? Okay, Angry Birds is actually a game that is consistent with the spirit of religious fundamentalist terrorists.
Oh.
That sentence really got to me.
It's at the top of page 89 in the book. Yeah. I know it isn't really politically correct, but how else to explain a game in which you are prepared to sacrifice your life just so you can destroy the houses of unarmed enemies and vaporize their wives and children inside, causing their deaths? Barbara.
I know this was written 10 years ago, and I'm reading this and I'm just picturing the news and Gaza.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I was going to say that.
It's almost Kafka-esque that he is writing about something that
Yes. Yeah. And again, you hear many people through history. Now, if you don't learn history, you're relegated to live it again. And that is what's happening there. And just venturing into some politics, as we've talked about Bibi a little bit, like my children who are 36, 33, and 28, they've only had Bibi as prime minister. That's all they know. And, they don't remember. And I always say I have a romantic relationship with Israel, but, I remember Golda Meir. I remember Levi Eshkol. I remember all these people. And my kids have had this one guy who speaks English very well and should probably be in jail. That's just that's not a Macomb opinion.
That's the same thing.
So, and I also think that the whole, it was pigs and, pigs aren't kosher. That was also funny. And I also think now I think more kids are vegetarians. And then vegan is that's a whole other
Don't
thing.
go there.
Yeah, I'm not going there. Elaine.
Okay, if you remember, and I remember, when the Vietnam War started, we started watching things on television that we never saw before.
Yes.
And you get sensitized to it.
Yes.
It becomes the norm.
Yes.
I mean, I'm eating dinner and I'm watching people's brains blow up all over the world. Okay, so this is the same thing as the game. What I found about his books, although they're 10 years old, it could be written exactly
Yes.
today.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that that's what's happening with the kids. They're so desensitized
Yes.
to violence.
Yes.
And to the world.
Yes.
It's their world that
Yes.
they're inheriting, totally different than our world.
Yes.
Totally.
Evie.
Well, the same thing I would say about conversations. I mean, the languages that I've gotten used to raising sons and grandsons, maybe 40 years ago would not enter my mind, or I would not understand a lot of things I don't understand the meaning of in terms of current language altogether. But I think language has changed so much and expressions have changed so much and it's not just the written word, it's the spoken word and just the way that kids speak to adults. Just having to get used to the whole difference in semantics has been a little bit of a challenge.
When we grew up, we called our parents' friends Mrs. and Mr.
Yes.
My grandkids would never think of calling my kids' friends, Mr. Friend or Dr. blah, blah, blah.
My son's kids and my daughter's kids who are your age still call me. And I say, you can call me, but we're used to it.
Yeah, they're used to it. I also think, and I can't help but bring up, in Jewish Real Classics, we watched Lenny, which is about Lenny Bruce. And the things he said that he got arrested for over and over again would be, I could show you a YouTube person doing it right now, never mind our grandchildren and everyone else. And Abby, I think you're absolutely right with this change in language and how we view norms. And even then, when they arrested him, he had said, some terrible words, and when he says them in his show, he gets arrested, but he's in the court and he says them. And he said to the police, can the justice in what word? And the police repeats it. And then Lenny Bruce's attorney says, do you say that amongst the police? Of course they did. They said all those terrible things. And he's like, yes, it made me, and that, the movie was made in 74. Lenny died in 66. He was only 40.
Really?
Yeah, he was only 40 years old. Anyway, it was an interesting movie. It was an interesting. Yeah, he was really young. And people today who credit him, and Rabbi and I were talking about this, Sarah Silverman and Eddie Murphy, they all credit Richard Pryor, they all credit him. And I wonder if he could just see what these comedians say and can say.
They can say anything.
They can say absolutely anything.
Like George Carlin with the 7
The 7 words, that's all right.
And that's become a nerd too, to everything that's going on.
Yeah.
With the new normal, just like.
Right. Again, going back to when Esme said, oh, hell yes. To which my daughter said, I'm Safta. She goes, all right, you can say that in front of Safta. And I said, don't say that in front of Grandma. Because I don't think she's 10 years older than I am. And I don't think Grandma would appreciate that.
Well, I have to tell you, Vanessa, hell yes is nothing compared to what comes out of my 20-year-old grandson's mouth. The F word is his constant.
Yeah.
And that's how he talks to me. I mean, he's using that as his favorite adjective. I mean, it just makes me nuts, but I don't say a word.
No, I thank you. I think, listen, Esme's only 4. I'm sure she'll get the bad language eventually. And I think, as grandparents, the best way is to just, to be quiet. And there's a lot of videos about gentle parenting, and that's not the way I was brought up, nor how I brought up my kids. And my Litel's like, say gentle touches, and Max is biting Esme. I'm like, gentle touches. You gotta pull them off. Anyway, there has to be a happy medium in there, and I try to adhere to all of Litel's rules as best I can, but sometimes it's hard. It's just very hard, anyway. So we are ready to go on to chapter 5. I'm still looking at books and I'll try to get that to you so people can say, oh, let's do this, let's do that. Again, what great insights today. It just makes me think about, I read it and I think about it. And then once we discuss it, I think about it again. And I'm just happy. I think he's a wonderful writer. I love his sense of humor.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's just, it's a relief to read.
But it's a lot of food for thought.
It's a lot of, yes.
Exactly.
Well, thanks to all of you. It's a lot of food.
Thank you.
Yes. Oh, thank you. All right. Oh, March 5th is our next,
No.
February 5th. Woohoo, February 5th. I skipped a month. So we'll see you the first week in February and it's good to see everyone. Sue Roberts, is it nice and warm in Arizona?
It's been a little chilly, but yes, it's gonna be 70 today.
Oh, yeah, that's not
The
chilly.
sun is always out and there's no snow.
Aha. Sue Alec, hand up? No.
Yeah, Vanessa, I have a recommendation for the evening book club.
Yes. What is
a
it?
book, a book that I am reading at the time. It's called The Woman Beyond the Sea.
Okay. I have to look.
And I would suggest you just take a look at it.
Okay.
It's very interesting about Jewish relationships.
Yeah. Let's see.
It's a little
Yeah, she wrote, I have it as want to read. So, I'm full for this year, but I can put it on next year. It looks good.
okay.
There's a bunch of authors, but Sarit Yishay Leve, she wrote, The Jerusalem Bride,
Mhm.
and which, I thought she had good, her writing was good, but I didn't like the characters, so I'll have to read this and see if they're sympathetic characters. Okay.
There was another, I think.
Thank you. See everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.